Right now, somewhere in Taiwan, a massive machine, roughly the size of a school bus, is printing electronic circuits thinner than a single strand of human DNA. It costs an astronomical $200 million. There are only a handful of these machines anywhere on Earth, and almost all of them are concentrated in one single place, barely 100 miles off the Chinese coastline. Every iPhone, every cutting-edge AI processor, and every modern fighter jet relies completely on what comes out of that specific building. This is the extraordinary story of TSMC, the single most critical company in the world that you've probably never heard of. The story begins in 1931 in Ningbo, Republic of China. A boy is born into a middle-class family during one of the most chaotic, bloody centuries in human history. By the time he graduates high school, young Morris Chang has survived a world war, fled the Japanese invasion twice, outlasted a brutal civil war, and learned a vital lesson. The real secret to a long life is simply being somewhere else when the bombs start falling. So, when he turns 18, he does exactly that. He moves to America. "I want to be a writer," Morris tells his father. "My son, it's the early 1950s in America," his father replies. "There are Chinese laundry workers, restaurant owners, engineers, and professors. But there are no Chinese lawyers, no politicians, and certainly no writers." Determined nonetheless, Morris eventually gets accepted into Harvard. By his second year, he transfers to MIT, earning both his bachelor's and master's degrees in mechanical engineering. Unwilling to stop there, he applies for a PhD twice, and both times he fails the qualifying exams. However, where others might see defeat, opportunity strikes. Two distinct job offers land on his desk. Ford Motor Company offers $479 a month. Sylvania Semiconductor offers $480 a month. When Ford refuses to match the extra dollar, Morris makes his choice. That single, solitary dollar becomes the tiny margin by which Morris Chang stumbles into the semiconductor industry, and, spoiler alert, changes the world forever. So, the next time someone tells you a single dollar can't change anything, you'll know better. Turns out, Morris is astonishingly good at making microchips. But what exactly is a semiconductor? Think of it as the ultimate electronic brain behind virtually every smart tech device imaginable. Your smartphone, microwave, refrigerator, and entire smart home setup? Yes. Your bank account network? A military fighter jet? Or the life support machine keeping someone's grandmother alive? Absolutely. Semiconductors have quietly become the invisible skeleton of modern civilization. Without them, you are essentially a confused medieval peasant. With them, you are still a confused peasant, except now you're a modern one who can order hot food straight to your door in 3 taps on your phone. For the next 25 years, Chang steadily climbs the corporate ladder at Texas Instruments, a titan in the American tech landscape. He becomes a director, then a vice president, eventually running their entire global semiconductor operations. But this was merely the prelude. In 1985, a sudden phone call comes from a small island in the western Pacific Ocean. If teenagers go through an emo phase to assert their identity, the Taiwanese government had a vastly different idea. Build a world-class semiconductor industry right on the island. They recruited the Industrial Technology Research Institute, ITRI, as their foundational base. But they desperately needed a visionary leader, someone who had survived wars, mastered the chip industry, knew where all the corporate bodies were buried, and possessed a ruthless, near-unhinged obsession with competitive contract bridge. At the ripe age of 54, Morris Chang arrives in Taiwan. To realize Taiwan's ambitious dream, Chang sketches out an idea so radically unthinkable that almost everyone in the global tech industry assumes he's lost his mind. In 1985, the semiconductor world operated strictly under one traditional model: integrated device manufacturers, or IDMs. Tech giants like Intel, Texas Instruments, and Samsung designed their own chips and manufactured them inside their own private factories. That was simply how things were done. Then came Chang's wild proposition. Instead of designing our own chips, Chang suggested, let's just manufacture chips exclusively for other companies. Wait, you mean we're going to cook using other people's recipes? An official asked. Precisely, Chang said. And you think they'll just hand us their top-secret recipes? Yes. Their multi-billion-dollar secret formulas? Yes. Are you insane? Why on earth would they trust us? Because we will never compete with them, Chang explained calmly. We will only build their chips. That's it. That is either pure genius or the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Historically speaking, Chang replied, those two things are often the exact same. The Taiwanese government decided to trust Morris Chang. In 1987, Chang founded Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, the world's very first pure-play semiconductor foundry. The government put up 48% of the capital. Dutch industrial powerhouse Philips Electronics chipped in 27%. Private Taiwanese families, quietly encouraged by state officials, funded the rest. Interestingly, Chang himself received no initial founder stock. Speaking of securing sensitive assets, let's take a brief moment to talk about protecting your personal data. Right now, shadowy data brokers are quietly harvesting your name, email address, home address, and phone number, then selling it off to the highest bidder. That's precisely how random banks call you out of nowhere knowing your entire history, or how you get those fraudulent texts claiming a package couldn't be delivered. You click one bad link, and suddenly hackers own your device. Cleaning that mess up manually could take years, but you can automate it in minutes with Incogni. Incogni acts on your behalf by hunting down dozens of data brokers, sending legally binding removal requests, and aggressively following up until your private information is scrubbed from the web. Their upgraded plans feature an exposure scanner to pinpoint compromised data and a monthly risk assessment report to track your privacy progress. Protect your digital identity today. Head over to incognitoni.com/crayoncapital and use the code crayoncapital to get 60% off your subscription. The link is available in the description below. Now back to TSMC. The company's very first fabrication facility, or fab, was little more than a repurposed production line inside an old ITRI building. Its initial clients were legacy tech companies like Siemens, Motorola, and Texas Instruments, all perfectly happy to offload their outdated, low-margin chip production. It was a humble start, but Chang envisioned a future nobody else could see. The world was about to rely on hyper-specialized design firms. By the 1990s, a massive shift occurred. While traditional IDM titans were still mocking the foundry business model, a new breed of tech startups exploded onto the scene: fabless chip companies. Firms like Qualcomm, Broadcom, and NVIDIA focused entirely on genius chip design, but they couldn't afford the astronomical costs of building multi-billion-dollar fabrication plants. They needed a reliable manufacturer. And guess who held all the cards? Then came the year 2000, and the disastrous dot-com bubble burst. A staggering $5 trillion in market value vanished into thin air. Global demand for chips collapsed overnight, orders were canceled, and tech revenues plummeted. Mayday! The market is crashing. Company executives panicked. Let's double down and expand, Chang announced. And we are not laying off a single worker. But sir, one more word, and I'll expand your severance package. Chang's colossal gamble paid off spectacularly. When the tech market eventually roared back to life, TSMC had massive manufacturing capacity ready to go, while its competitors were caught completely unprepared. TSMC's lead grew exponentially. By 2005, after nearly 2 decades of being proved undeniably right about almost everything, Morris Chang decided that managing a global semiconductor empire was enough for one lifetime. He officially stepped down as CEO. At first, the transition seemed smooth. Orders remained strong, and the cash machine kept running. But then the devastating 2008 global financial crisis struck. Profits nosedived. For the first time in its history, TSMC engaged in workforce layoffs. The newly appointed CEO implemented severe performance cuts, but execution was clumsy and morale shattered. Technical yields on next-generation manufacturing nodes stalled out, causing major clients to panic and pull back orders. The board realized there was only one person who could fix the sinking ship. Morris, we need you back. I'm 77 years old, Chang reminded them. We know, but the company is falling apart. My back hurts, Chang sighed. Fine. When do I start? At age 77, while most people his age were arguing with their grandkids over what to watch on television, Morris Chang returned to office with aggressive energy. He immediately reversed all layoffs, dramatically increased the research and development budget, and recalled retired engineering legends to spearhead the breakthrough into 28-nanometer manufacturing. It was a triumph. TSMC's new production yield rates utterly crushed Samsung's. The gap between TSMC and the rest of the world widened into a massive chasm. By 2010, Apple was the hottest tech company on the planet. The iPhone had disrupted mobile computing, but deep within Apple headquarters, an executive finally did the math. Quick question. Who actually manufactures the brain inside our iPhones? Samsung, sir. Samsung? As in the same Samsung currently trying to destroy us with their Galaxy phones. That would be the one. So we are paying our primary competitor billions of dollars to build the core technology we use to fight them? Correct. They see all our design blueprints. I need to go lie down in a dark room. Apple quietly launched Project Azalea, a top-secret mission to find a high-end chip manufacturer that wasn't actively trying to steal their market share. Apple initially approached Intel, but Intel's CEO reportedly turned them down, deciding the profit margins weren't worth Apple's notoriously brutal quality demands. It was like a friend asking you to help them rob a bank for $5. You'd have to be completely crazy to accept. So, Jeff Williams, Apple's future chief operating officer, flew straight to Taiwan for a quiet dinner with Morris Chang. The initial conversation was cautious, but the chemistry was undeniable. There was only one catch. TSMC didn't yet possess the manufacturing scale or hyper-precision Apple required. Chang promised they would build it. Over the next 3 years, Chang committed billions of dollars to construct a massive, dedicated 20-nanometer manufacturing plant built solely for Apple, before Apple had even signed a binding long-term contract. Just to clarify, TSMC executives asked nervously, "We're spending billions to build an entire megafactory for one client who hasn't fully committed yet?" "Yes," Chang replied. "And what if they back out?" "They won't." "But if they won't." Once again, Chang's high-stakes gamble paid off. Apple ultimately transferred its chip manufacturing exclusively to TSMC. Apple's annual spend with TSMC skyrocketed from $2 billion in 2014 to over $24 billion by 2025, eventually representing more than 20% of TSMC's total revenue. Apple was just the catalyst. Soon, every major tech player realized they needed TSMC. NVIDIA needed them for AI and graphics processors. AMD, Qualcomm, Broadcom, and MediaTek quickly followed suit. The entire fabless ecosystem that Morris Chang had envisioned decades prior was now running entirely through TSMC's facilities. The number of fabless chip design companies grew from roughly 20 in the late 1980s to thousands worldwide. TSMC relentlessly shattered physics barriers, mass-producing 10-nanometer chips in 2016, followed rapidly by 7 nanometers, 5 nanometers, and 3 nanometers nodes. Samsung tried desperately to keep up, spending tens of billions, missing yield targets, and losing high-profile clients. By late 2019, Samsung's global foundry market share hovered at a modest 17.8%, while TSMC dominated with an overwhelming 52.7%. However, the most dramatic defeat was handed to Intel, the legendary pioneer of modern microprocessors. Back in the mid-2000s, Intel was an untouchable titan. They owned state-of-the-art factories, the best on Earth, or so they believed. But running your own private factories while simultaneously designing chips, managing corporate overhead, and keeping Wall Street happy creates massive friction. Intel began falling behind on node shrink technology. TSMC, by contrast, focused on one single discipline, manufacturing chips better, faster, and more precisely than anyone else on Earth. By 2021, the company that had invented the modern computer chip was forced to outsource its own advanced manufacturing to TSMC. By late 2025, TSMC controlled over 71% of the global foundry market, less of a competitive market, and more of an absolute monopoly. Then came the COVID-19 pandemic, forcing world governments to realize just how terrifyingly dependent they had become on a single supplier. A modern vehicle relies on 1,000 to 3,000 microchips to operate everything from engine sensors and transmission controls to digital displays and emergency braking systems. When global lockdowns began, automotive manufacturers slashed their chip orders to cut costs. It seemed sensible, until consumer demand rebounded far faster than anticipated. Automakers quickly called TSMC to reclaim their manufacturing slots, only to be given shocking news. "We're sorry, but we gave your production slots to Sony and Microsoft for the PlayStation and Xbox." While car makers were canceling orders, lockdown consumers were buying laptops, game consoles, and electronics in record numbers. TSMC's production lines were booked solid. Can you somehow rush our order? Desperate automotive executives begged. The current wait time is approximately 1 year, TSMC replied. A year? Would you like us to put you on the waiting list? Global automakers lost hundreds of billions in revenue simply because they couldn't get basic chips. Medical device manufacturers panicked, military supply chains froze, and intelligence agencies raised emergency alarm bells. World leaders came to a sobering realization. No single country could afford to let one island control the silicon backbone of the global economy and military power. Meanwhile, in Beijing, Chinese leadership was paying close attention. China has claimed Taiwan as its sovereign territory since 1949 and has never renounced the right to take it by force. For decades, invading Taiwan was considered economically suicidal due to Western trade sanctions. But TSMC changed the geopolitical math entirely. If China were to gain control of TSMC, it would control the global tech supply chain overnight. However, TSMC also serves as Taiwan's ultimate silicon shield. Consider the military dilemma from Beijing's perspective. Option A*: invade Taiwan and attempt to capture TSMC intact. But chip fabrication requires 50,000 highly specialized engineers, experts who would instantly flee, strike, or refuse to operate under occupation. You cannot barrel bomb your way into complex institutional engineering knowledge. Option B*: invade Taiwan and accidentally destroy TSMC's facilities. In doing so, you obliterate the global tech economy, including China's own tech giants like Huawei and DJI, which rely heavily on these chips. Option C*: wait for domestic Chinese chip manufacturers to catch up. China has poured hundreds of billions into its domestic chip industry over the last 2 decades. Yet its top manufacturer, SMIC, struggles at 7nm and 5nm production, while TSMC is already commercializing 2nm architecture and accelerating away. Determined to de-risk its supply chains, the U.S. government passed the $52 billion CHIPS and Science Act in 2022, aggressively incentivizing domestic semiconductor manufacturing. The centerpiece of the strategy was convincing TSMC to build advanced fabrication plants on American soil. TSMC pledged $65 billion to construct 3 massive fabs in Phoenix, Arizona, marking the largest foreign direct investment in U.S. history. Yet major hurdles remain. Manufacturing a chip in Arizona costs nearly double what it costs in Taiwan. The intricate network of local suppliers, military-grade efficiency, and decades of operational mastery cannot simply be exported with a construction contract. TSMC has had to fly hundreds of Taiwanese engineers to Arizona just to get the initial lines operational. Furthermore, TSMC's most advanced next-generation nodes, like its breakthrough 2nm process, will remain strictly in Taiwan for the foreseeable future. And so, that brings us to where we stand today. The single most powerful economic driver on planet Earth is smaller than a strand of human DNA. It is manufactured primarily by one company, on one vulnerable island, barely 100 miles from a superpower that claims it. And it all started with a 56-year-old visionary who built a factory that made nothing original, sold nothing under its own brand name, and refused to compete with its own customers. In an industry spanning continents and worth trillions, Morris Chang proved that absolute trust was the ultimate product. As the ancient philosopher Lao Tzu once wrote, "A leader is best when people barely know he exists. When his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, 'We did it ourselves.'"